All right. So, as always, if you don't want to listen to me talk for 7 minutes, just mute the video and listen to your own music or just listen in silence. No judgment. I don't really care. So this is something that I drew for Anime Expo almost like a year ago. So for AX15 and now we're already in 2016, it's just taken me forever to actually sit down and do the narration or voiceover for this because voiceovers are so hard for me. This is literally like my seventh take of this, and each take has only been like 30 seconds, and it's it's just hard to talk about things when you don't even remember anything about the picture itself other than that you drew it, and it's just nothing's really happening at this point. I'm just putting in the flat colors, and I don't even think that I shade in the same way anymore. So I don't really have anything to say. So I guess we can go into a little bit of a story about how I managed to get into what is it called, Fanime this year. So over a couple of months back on Twitter, I saw somebody who I was following post up that like that day was the last day to apply for Fanime. And I heard that Fanime is basically you get in by a judgment process, not like an Anime Expo where you get in by a first come first serve or more like a seniority system, but you actually get judged for Fanime. And I said, it wouldn't hurt at all just to apply to Fanime, and if the judging is as critical and as tough as I've heard it is, then I'm not going to get in and I'll just have wasted like 5 minutes, which is like not a big deal. Just wasted 5 minutes to apply to the thing. So I applied, I did it very half-heartedly, and it turned out I didn't even finish the application because about 2 weeks later I got an email from them saying like, hey, finish up your application. And so I finished up the application, I sent it in, and I didn't really expect anything out of it. But the thing is that a couple of months later, I think after winter break, like sometime in January, I think, they actually accepted my application. I got into Fanime. Now, that's really great because that means that my art is actually worth something, I guess. Like it's actually good, or somebody deemed it to be good for whatever reason, because I actually made it through the judging process. The problem though with that is that I hadn't figured out how I would get there. So I live in Southern California, and Fanime is up in San Jose in the Bay Area. So that's like a really far way to drive, and far way, period. I mean, that's like going across like 2 or 3 states, some places in the United States. And this is like all driving within one state, so it kind of tells you how big it is, that distance. I hadn't figured out where I was going to stay, how I was going to get there. So I was in a really big pinch because I had not put any thought into it. I didn't do any research or do any sort of pre-planning for this because I already assumed that I would be rejected. And it was just something like, oh, haha, I suck and I got rejected from Fanime. So I'm obviously a trash artist. But anyway, luckily enough, I was able to talk to a friend and he let me crash at his place for that Fanime weekend or whatever you want to call it over, basically during the con period. And I'm just going to bite the bullet and drive all the way from SoCal all the way up to NorCal, those 7 hellish hours. But I got into Fanime, which is pretty cool. So yeah. So now I think we're actually doing something interesting here. This one I remember being a lot of fun because I like to shade abs. And this one kind of has like a funny perspective on it. And you get to see, I defined her rib cage pretty well, which is pretty fun. I like drawing like that, like upside down V thing. That's the rib cage. I like drawing that. But overall, I think just learning how to draw the musculature and like the different parts of the body and shading it correctly it's just so hard because I don't have a problem like in my brain visualizing what I want to draw, but getting like, I think I have a lot of problems with value because, well, and with color too, as you can see, this is just a mess, but getting the right value to convey the depth of what I'm trying to draw is really tough. And the other thing that, and I don't know why, because I do this because this is just a stupid way to do this, is that I do all the shading first and then I follow up with the highlights. So whenever I do the shading, like I do everything relative. Like my brain isn't able to like shade the way that it's going to look like in the final product. I always, whenever I go from the flats, like the very first shades that I put down is usually for the skin, and I always shade too light because relative, you know, around the skin, everything else is still unshaded, so I go like really light on the shading. But later on, once I fill everything in, then the shades can become much darker. But when I do the highlights, then that kind of, because I like contrast, that makes me want to push the shades even darker. But at this point, like, you know, the first thing that I've shaded is like barely, you know, is super light, and the last thing that I shaded is super dark. And then I have to go back and I have to redo it over and over again, iteratively again and again. And I don't really know how to, like, a better way to do it. That's just the way I do it, and that's the way my brain thinks. And I hate myself for that because I waste so much damn time just going around and around in loops of refining. And I'm not saying like, you know, I want to be able to do everything in one pass, but nowadays, like, I have to go around in like 3 or 4 refinement cycles just to get to a somewhat decent stage where I can pull it into Photoshop and then mess around with the colors a little bit more. Because as amazing as Photoshop is, you still have to put in the work to begin with. You have to have something halfway decent before you import it into Photoshop and work on it. Because if you have a totally flat picture, flat colors and everything, pulling it into Photoshop isn't going to magically make it shaded or, you know, even rendered, you know, properly. So that's the thing that I'm struggling with the most. I think I did this one pretty easily. I think you saw that I had to like redo the abs like 2 or 3 times. But this one I think I pretty much finished up in like 1 pass or 2 passes, I would call it. So that wasn't too bad. And after I pulled this into Photoshop, man, oh man, did this need a lot of work in terms of color. It's really hard because, again, I don't ever know what kind of background that these pictures are gonna have, and so then I always just leave it white, or I leave it like it's just some random color in the background, and my brain, you know, colors or does the shading and the highlighting off of that. So to take something that was shaded in one color and then try to, you know, put it onto a background which has a totally different color, just really, really screws me up. And I have absolutely no idea how to fix that, because I always start by drawing the foreground and then I worry about the background later, or at least the midground first. Sometimes I do draw some random crap in the foreground. Maybe that should be one of my super late New Year's resolutions, is to figure out what I'm actually doing before I actually start doing it when I draw. Because whenever I draw, it's always based off of like this one idea, like this super small portion of the picture. Like this one, my first thought was I want to draw some girl doing in a selfie pose, and then after that I'll figure out the rest. And I kind of just haphazardly put things together, and somehow in the end kind of sort of works, but it kind of sort of doesn't work at the same time. And planning is definitely something I'm not good at. As you can tell throughout this whole thing, I don't plan whenever I go to a con, I don't plan whenever I do a picture. So I think I'm just about done here. So go to my store, buy this print, it's super cheap, $9.99, and I will talk to you in the next video if you didn't mute me.